Hello, everyone. Good evening, afternoon, good morning. Welcome to Global PropTech Online. Before we get started, a few housekeeping things. So, if you have any technical problems or issues that you need help with, please go to the left-hand side of your screen. You'll see the Sessions button. Click on that and then go into the Help Desk, and they can help you with your technical problem. Also, if you have any questions or comments for the presenter, please write them in the chat screen on the right-hand side of your monitor. Now, this session, like the previous sessions, will be recorded and made available for on-demand viewing on our YouTube channel once today is over and we've had a chance to go through and do a little bit of editing to the videos to clean them up and everything and put nice little headers on there. So please be on the lookout for that. And now, I would like to turn it over to our final keynote speaker of today, Brian Sutherland, who's industry principal with Yardi. Brian, over to you.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Derek, for the introduction, and thanks everyone for joining. I am joining today from actually my home, based out of Santa Barbara, California, in the United States, and looking forward to presenting for you all today. It's tough to believe it's December 8th of a very fluid and challenging year, and as real estate operators and technology providers at Yardi, we certainly have our ear to the ground as far as what's going on with our clients, and really here to help. And so during today's presentation, wanted to explore a number of topics, including a real estate overview as far as what's going on specifically in the office sector, and then really how we see our clients responding. In terms of my role at Yardi, I oversee the commercial product from a sales and marketing perspective. But with that, I'm fortunate enough to work with many of our clients that have various organizational structures, various asset classes, and really across North America, but also internationally. I get involved in working with clients from time to time in international markets as well. So my goal really is to give you some insight and a view into both the Yardi organization as well as our client base. In terms of our clients, we have over 10,000 clients at Yardi that range in sizes and asset classes, but we're 100% real estate focused, and I'll really start drilling down into the different asset classes and then really kind of land at office towards the end of the presentation. So with that, I'll go ahead and jump into the agenda. First, I want to talk about Yardi's commitment both to our communities that we office out of, our employees, and then also our customers. We're going to talk about commercial real estate. Obviously, been a very challenging year. So at a high level, just go over some of the disruption we've seen, how our clients are responding. And then we're really going to start looking at some of the mindset of tenants and really how this market is impacting them. And then from a landlord side, how that impacts you when it comes to evaluating tenant risk, budgeting and forecasting, where you're investing capital. And then we'll be talking about office reentry, which is certainly a hot topic right now, and something that's certainly going to impact us moving into 2021. And I'll talk to you a little bit about what that means further on in the presentation. So now let's go ahead and jump into it. The first thing I mentioned was Yardi's commitment. Yardi's committed to giving back to the communities that we office in first and foremost. And so we have about 45 offices across the world. And with that, we have a lot of community-based giving. Our real focus is energy conservation and sustainability, early childhood education, and natural disaster relief. With COVID-19, we've really shifted and given a lot to local food banks. And so over $3 million we've donated since March to local food banks during this pandemic. Additionally, we've really tried to give back to our industry. And when I say that, specifically industry grants. And so there's two grants that we have given this year. One to Realcomm, an organization based out of the US. And with this a series of webinars that are really focused on relevant topics. And so this is about halfway through. We'll have another set of webinars coming early this year, where we bring in thought leadership and we tackle relevant topics. Additionally, which I'll be touching on a little bit today, is the BOMA grant that we gave that's really focused on tenants, where we did a nationwide survey in the U.S. to get a sense of tenants' feedback, what their concerns are, what their challenges are, and really how that impacts landlords. What I would highlight, while these two industry grants were US-based, there's never been something that's impacted real estate so broadly and really at a global scale. And so certainly relevant to all markets when we get that tenant feedback, because I think a lot of the trends don't just apply to the US market, but really to all international markets where our clients own and operate real estate assets. So in terms of what we'll be exploring at a high level today is, let me go back a couple slides here, excuse me, is really a real estate overview, looking at multifamily, industrial, retail, and office. We'll be exploring some trends and challenges, as well as technology and where we see technology changing within each one of these asset classes to support employees, tenants who are our customers at Yardi. So first, we're going to kind of do an analysis of what's happening in each one of these sectors, things like occupancy and leasing rates. And then we'll do a deeper understanding of what tenants are thinking a little bit further on in the presentation. And then lastly, what employees are thinking, because that's impacting tenants' decision-making process when we're talking about office reentry and how employees are reacting and feeling about work from home versus work from office, as well as things like safety when they're re-entering the office, which we'll be exploring a little bit as well. So let's go ahead and first tackle multifamily. At a high level, there's been a flight from the suburbs to lower cost cities. And so we've seen that. And with that, there's, from a rate perspective, multifamily rates have remained relatively relatively flat. And there's really been a divergence between the falling rents in primary markets, as well as a steadier rising rent in secondary markets, which has caused it to really be flat. And so while some areas are going down, other areas are going up. What we're seeing from a trend perspective is more mixed use at the property level. And so a number of our customers have been really exploring where they're putting their capital in future projects. And so addressing things like co-working potentially at the multifamily property. We now have work from home residents with kids that need to be homeschooled and limited space in potentially these apartments and communities. And so with that, there is a number of our clients that are now investing capital into making more co-working type locations at these multifamily properties. Some of the challenges that we really heard out of the gate was understanding deferrals that were happening within the multifamily space, tracking deferrals and seeing the impact from a revenue perspective of deferrals that were happening. And then once those deferrals came due, were residents really making good on those payments? And how did local jurisdictions really impact that? Meaning, did they have a freeze on being able to take collection pursuits, or was there a moratorium on evictions, those type of things? From a technology standpoint, certainly seen a lot of focus on things like self-guided tours, right, where folks can come into the communities, can self-service, if you will, from a tour standpoint. Chatbots have certainly been more popular recently, and really in encouraging a lot of smart technology within that to respond to inquiries from residents and do that quickly. And finally, more on the virtual tours, virtual videos of the communities to increase folks to lease. On the industrial side, rents have been rising in a lot of areas, especially in last mile locations, and that's certainly been because of the rise of e-commerce. Certain industries are getting hit hard, and so you take party rentals, for example. They don't need space at this time, and they're storing a lot of party rental supplies without revenue coming in. So those type of tenants can be at risk, while other tenants have really flourished. You look at things like cold beverage storage, where there's been a lot of growth. Additionally, parking has become really a hot commodity because there's more need for local delivery, and many of these industrial locations don't have parking lots that were a suitable size. And so when we look at those folks that are out in the market, when they're looking for new space, parking has certainly become a large part of that. Additionally, retail malls have really become an area of focus. And when we're looking at that last mile delivery component, really the idea of having some industrial within those spaces, or repurpose some of those anchor tenants' larger spaces into industrial locations. From a technology standpoint, there's been a lot of focus on deal oversight. So as deals are coming in, these are longer term deals. How are these deals getting qualified? How are we making sure that these deal terms make sense, that we're improving our lease spreads, and more importantly, that we're leasing to the right tenants that are in a viable business long term. Real-time forecast, and so certainly in a fluid market with potentially changeover, especially or turnover, especially on the smaller suites, really to have more real time when it comes to revenue forecasting. In the construction management, in the US, there's over 235 million square feet under construction today, and that's rising. And so when we see technology focus, there's been a lot of interest from our industrial clients on how to effectively manage construction projects to make sure that they're mitigating risk and they're keeping their construction jobs on time and on budget. And this sector in particular has really been exploding when it comes to that. So now let's shift gears to the retail sector. From a transaction standpoint, lease volume is down and down significantly, about 60%. Construction is down certainly, and since 2008, it's been on that trajectory of being lower each year. We see certain areas flourishing while other areas are facing some challenging times. An example would be grocery anchored tenants, that are deemed essential business. Obviously, their volume is going up. Less people eating out at restaurants. So the folks in restaurants are being hurt, while the grocery anchor tenants are thriving during this market. There is a lot of innovation that's happened in previous years to really innovate what a mall looks like, and to look at things like lifestyle and experience type of centers. Unfortunately, many of our clients that kind of went down that road are now facing challenging times. So large entertainment centers that may not be active, large movie theaters, et cetera, at the property where people can't go during this time is certainly challenging for our clients. From a technology standpoint, there's been a bigger need for shorter term leases. And so when you're looking at specialty leases and online leasing, and so our focus has been there because clients are really demanding more kind of turnkey lease types for retail customers coming in. And there has been a lot of construction and redevelopment. And so our retail clients continue to invest in that area, and really more broadly continue to invest in technologies to support them, whether it's trying to reduce headcount and improve their business processes, or really as they go into new areas, for instance, redevelopment of their current assets, really solutions to help support them in those areas. From an office standpoint, I'll go over some numbers in a minute, but some of the trends that are out there is really work from home versus work from office. We're seeing a slowdown of lease renewals. In fact, I think there's longer term leases in the office sector, and I think a lot of unknown as far as where folks are going, whether they're going to renew, whether they're going to increase or decrease space. And so with that, it's a lot of rent pressure. The challenges, I would say, are the unknowns of the pandemic. How long work from home is going to be our norm, and how that's going to impact the office sector long term. Commuting into the office is less attractive, being in public transit. Physical occupancy, and so not just the long-term leases that make up your rent roll, but really looking at the amount of employees coming back and really using that as an indicator to look at risk. Hub and spoke models and just not understanding how that's going to be fully adopted has been a challenge. From a technology standpoint, certainly a need for a couple things. One, it would be more flex leasing, more hoteling type office setups, co-working, so maybe flipping some of the empty space into traditional co-working locations, and then really ensuring occupant health and safety. So as those employees come in, how are you going to ensure and whose responsibility is it to ensure the health and safety of the employees? Does that really fall on the tenants or does that fall on the landlords? And so just a few things we're thinking about. So really explore just at a really high level, multifamily, office, industrial, and retail. Certain areas have been hit harder due to the pandemic, certainly retail, but I would say that challenge has been there for a longer period of time. And I think very much kind of change was already in motion within that sector. The real disruption seems to be, and the most unknown seems to be in the office sector. And so, when you look more broadly outside of the real estate industry, most industries have had some type of disruption by technology. And so, for instance, Kodak was impacted by the digital camera. Xerox was impacted by PDF and email. And retail was impacted a number of years ago by e-commerce. COVID is really impacting the real estate industry the most within the office sector. And I think most of the unknowns are within that space. And so this type of disruption has never been faced before. And it's going to really, in my opinion, reshape what the future of office looks like. And I think it's mission critical for landlords to have their ear to the ground on tenants and employees, what they're thinking, and making sure that they're responding properly at the right time. And so I'm going to unpack that a little bit. But before I do so, wanted to discuss just some of the numbers in the office sector. And this is across about 130 markets in the US. And again, international markets, I think we're going to see kind of a similar set of numbers. Occupancy is about 86%, and that's a decrease of about 0.5% since March. Asking rates are down 2 to 3%. Development has slowed since March. Certainly, each quarter we were expecting to see some sort of increase, but has continued to decrease. And subleasing is up about 40% since March, and so that has steadily grown. Although subleasing still is only about 1 to 2% of total leasing. Some of the unknowns that I kind of mentioned before were tenant space decisions and really what they're thinking about as their leases come up. Are they thinking about decreasing or increasing space? And so there's been a case that's been made for space density and the need for potentially more space. There's also been a case that says less tenants are going to come in, less employees are going to come in fewer days a week. So certainly our space needs will be less. And so that's one of the unknowns. Physical occupancy risk. There's maybe a case to be made. The longer work from home employees are out there, the less connected they'll be to the physical office. And going into the office, by public transit into city centers is less attractive. And so really from a landlord perspective, how do you really look at physical occupancy risk and how are you evaluating that, especially when it comes to budgeting and forecasting, knowing that you have tenants that are paying rent today, they're in long-term leases, but the employees of those tenants aren't coming in. And so there's substantial risk within there that needs to be evaluated. There's also occupier hardship. And so many countries in the US, obviously we had a lot of cash go into the market with things like PPP loans to support payroll. And then some of that was applied to rent as well. But really the importance of understanding those tenants that are occupying your spaces, understanding their business, is it viable long-term? Fortunately, within the office sector, many of the businesses are in decent shape, but their employees aren't returning into the office. And then is there going to be a shift and an evolution with how we view office and how we utilize space? And so a lot of clients are thinking about that. They're thinking about that as far as where they're going to put their capital and really how they're going to manage their spaces, their suites, moving forward to really attract tenants within the sector. So with that, these unknowns, some of the numbers where we're trending, Yardi felt it was important to really give back to our clients, the tenants, and really give, the landlords, to give them a sense of what the tenants were thinking. And kind of in that spirit, I wanted to highlight a COVID-19 impact study where we partnered with BOMA International, as well as Brightline, who conducted the survey, and Yardi underwrote it. And so between September 1st and October 31st, we did a nationwide study here in the US. There was a previous study that was in the DC area, Washington, DC. This one was nationwide. And we found 3,000 office space decision makers and influencers. And we conducted a very detailed survey that could be broken down on a national level, on a regional level, and really even at a portfolio level to see tenant sentiments and get a sense of what they're thinking about from a decision-making standpoint. So some of the things that were explored were attitudes towards the physical work environment, for example, what the office space decisions were going forward. So when you're looking at lease renewals coming up, what sort of decisions were being made. And then financial and operational implications. So, viability of business, hardship, where tenants were really struggling. And so I'm going to explore at a high level just a few of those bullet points. And so we'll start off really first with office tenants and what they were thinking about as far as office being really viable. And so we found it encouraging that 70 of the 3,000 decision makers surveyed, 74% of the respondents affirmed that in-person office is vital to business operations, but they also did acknowledge that the future of their space would change. Another couple of talking points on here was thoughts about moving to less dense, more isolated areas. So maybe a transformation from central business districts to suburban areas. 46% also thought it was important for landlords and the buildings to have technology to help contain the spread of the virus. And so when you're thinking about capital projects, putting investment into the assets, 40% of tenants really find value in that. So, but certainly find that 74% of the respondents knowing the office is vital is encouraging for the office sector. There's been a lot of gloom and doom type of mainstream media out there right now, but we did find this encouraging coming from office tenants. Another thing I wanted to highlight was 65% of commercial office decision makers continue to see significant value in on-site business operations, in particular as it relates to the 3 C's. And I think this is important: collaboration, coaching, and culture. And so when you look at work from home versus work from office, I think the 3 C's are often something that needs to be addressed. And the ability to always have to communicate through Teams or through various chat or Zoom meetings can be exhausting. And I don't think anyone can argue the value of being able to collaborate with team members in person and really having a culture within the office to facilitate growth and connection. And so, and also when you talk about coaching new employees coming in. One thing to highlight is we did a previous study. And so throughout the next couple slides, I'll show you when there's an increase. And so in this case, 65% of tenants see that value of having an on-site presence. And so again, another point of encouragement for the office sector, that tenants do see value in the office and by a large margin and want to come back to the office. So I wanted to highlight that slide. Okay, and so this one is really on some of the economic headwinds that office tenants are facing out there. 33% of the respondents say they've experienced at least a 25% revenue decline. 27% said they could experience a similar or greater decline in the future. And so this is important really when you're assessing your kind of tenant risk, when you're looking at your revenue risk, when you're doing your budgets and your revenue reforecast, really looking at what's going on with the tenants, how that's changing over time. And so I will highlight that we're doing and underwriting another survey that will be underway soon and be released in Q1 of next year. And so we can see over time, how tenants are responding and really where that's trending. And so for an example, we highlight down below in regards to struggling to make payroll payments. And so we had a reduction from the study that ended in May. And then as far as tenants struggling to pay office rent and meet their lease obligations, we also saw a decline with that. And so that's another encouraging thing. And hopefully with time that will continue in that direction. So this is just kind of going back to space being vital, really looking at how tenants are reassessing their space needs. And so 9% said they might need an increase in office space, 24% said they would be maintaining the same footprint, and then 54% said they would be reducing a square foot, while 12% are unsure. And so on the left-hand side, you see kind of a likelihood to reassess needs. And then on the right-hand side, of the 80% that are likely to reassess, kind of where they're at. We also broke this down by square footage. So on the bottom, just kind of highlight a couple things in blue. We saw an increase for those tenants that had 5,000 to 10,000 square feet, so up to 48% there, and then 71% for the April to May to 50%, 56% for the 25,000, to 50,000 square feet. So in any case, just some numbers as far as space reassessment and really kind of what those tenants are thinking about, and while they want to get back to the office, that office might look different, their space needs might be different. So one slide that I wanted to kind of highlight towards the end here of the presentation is really looking at office reentry and just challenge landlords and making sure that you're listening as far as what in-person office is going to look like. Employees are going to demand more schedule flexibility, and with that, maybe less employees coming back to the office, less days a week. And so with that, that might impact their space assessment needs. The 3 C's that I mentioned, collaboration, coaching, and culture, are extremely important to tenants as well as employees coming back into the office. Tenants are reassessing their space needs, and numbers show that. Office safety is important. So employees re-entering the office need to feel safe when they re-enter the office. So really, how are landlords and employers ensuring that? We see a flight to the suburbs. So when you're looking at where you're making investments, the suburbs are becoming more attractive. And then that hub and spoke model. So maybe work from office, work from home, and then maybe work at a location close to the home. And then there's potential revenue reduction with tenants. And we see that where they're talking about their revenue reduction, risk about meeting payroll, et cetera. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pause and look to see if there was any specific questions for me. And maybe I'll lean on Derek and anyone on that side to field any questions.
Yep. So there's no questions that have come through yet, Brian. For attendees that are here, please, if you have questions or comments, please write them in the chat box here. It's at 6 o'clock right now, so we may continue this over in the breakout session if there are no questions forthcoming in the chat box. Before we do that, though, I did have one question from me to you, Brian, on one of the earlier slides that you were showing, where looking at the office industry, it showed that there was currently an occupancy rate of around 86%, which was a 0.5% reduction from in March. Looking at that, can you provide a little bit more, I guess, clarity or insight or color around that for us? Because 86% seems like quite a high number of occupancy given the COVID situation that we've been experiencing this year and the extreme levels of work from home that we've all had to go through.
Yeah, so I think, in the office sector, obviously, long-term leases, and I think a lot of unknowns. And so I think tenants at this point are careful. I think they're closely evaluating what their space needs are, what their hardship is going to be long-term, and really slow to move when it comes to making decisions. I did also indicate that there's been that increase in subleasing listings, and I should be clear, so that's increased 40%. But the actual subleasing volume, we haven't seen a huge amount, and so there's more listings out there, but not a lot of movement. And so I attribute a lot of it to longer term leases, tenants being reluctant to make a major shift too quickly, and just a less transaction volume in general.
Mm-hmm.